Welcome to the very first episode of the Knife Dialogue. My name is John Demko, and I'm here with fellow knife maker Andrew Demko and Mike Wallace. What's up?
How's it going?
So, this is our very first episode, so I think it's best if we just do some introductions, talk about how everyone got started in knife making, and just try to get a sense of what we're going to do with this podcast. So, why don't you guys just talk about what you're doing right now?
Okay, so this is Andrew. You know, we're working on the 8010 and 8015 Scorpion Lock project, trying to do, you know, what we call a machine ground series, which people would say it's a mid-tech. We don't really call it that because we do everything in-house other than water jet and the rough blade grinding. So we're just trying to, you know, get a good start in the, you know, higher production numbers as opposed to just straight customs. So that's what we're mainly concentrating on now. Mike?
I'm just concentrating on fixed blades. That's kind of always been my thing. I kind of lack Andrew's genius for locking mechanisms, so I stick to what I know and what I can do. So just fixed blades. That's pretty much it.
And you're both working full-time at Cold Steel now.
We are full-time.
Yes.
R&D shop at Cold Steel in Pennsylvania. We're not in California with the rest of the crew there, so we just basically make knives, test knives. It's knives all day. It's pretty cool.
Cool. And I work with Demko Knives full-time, mainly machining all the stuff for the MG series on CNC machines, hand fitting the knives, dealing with all the orders, all that stuff, all the boring stuff. But let's just get right into it. Andrew, how did you get started making knives?
Well, I've been a huge knife fanatic since I was as old as I can remember. When I was 3, I remember I had a pocket, or like a pen knife, and it was horribly dull. It was like a butter knife, a folding butter knife, and I remember carrying that around. That's like my first memory, is having a little knife and always wanting knives. And I was always kind of allowed to have knives, even as a really little kid. I never got hurt or cut, probably because they weren't really sharp enough to do anything. But I've been into, you know, edge tools, hatchets, knives for all my entire life.
Mike Wallace?
Kind of the same boat, but for me, it wasn't just necessarily knives. It was anything that was kind of handmade, or anything that was...
I just choked on my coffee.
Yeah, coffee.
Yeah.
Okay. Just anything handmade, anything that you could, you know, use, and fascinated by tools and anything with an edge, you know, knives, swords, tomahawks, machetes, axes, the whole 9 yards has kind of always interested me, and just the fact that you could make something like that, something out of nothing, kind of always intrigued me.
Cool. I don't even know when I actually started. I can remember just trying to reach up and grab drill presses when I was little.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. You used to grab all the drill bits as a little kid. It was like a big giant drill bit. You go, Andrew, bad as hell. Like 6 years old. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, I can remember that. I can remember being like in junior high. Not that I would remember, but when we tried to quench those sword blades in the back here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what we did, but it wasn't right.
Well, we learned about not quenching 5160 in water. That's a very important lesson. Although, not as good as Mike's lesson about trying to flatten out what is that thing, a rototiller blade?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll learn about heat treat real quick trying to hammer one of those flat.
Yeah.
What was that?
That was a hard lesson learned. I had an old rototiller, and they're like kind of 90-ish.
90 with a twist for digging. It's like a...
Yeah,
for turning
up the ground for planting a garden, and I thought, this would make a pretty cool knife. You know, kind of had that kind of tanto shape on the end, so I figured, I'll just hammer it out. Well, I didn't know about steel and springiness and all that good stuff, and if I hit it and it shot up and caught me right in the head, I still have the scar up here. I bled like a stuck pig. It knocked me silly too.
No, in fairness though, that was in 7th grade.
Yeah, I was really young and dumb. I mean,
And I came over because we lived 200 yards away, whatever. So I went down his house, or he came up, our house, and he had his shit all over his head. What the heck did you? He pulls off his bandage, and he has like this crescent moon shaped scar right in the middle of his forehead.
That's funny.
Yeah, that was learned that lesson. Never did that one again.
So you should have heated it, annealed it,
Yeah.
slow cooled it, whatever. But you just hit it with a sledgehammer. So yeah, lesson learned. That's your first heat treatment metallurgy lesson, I guess.
Yeah.
That brings the point that we kind of started making knives in 7th grade. We had a metal shop, and we forged chisels out of '01. I think it was actually like hexagon. It was a hex stock. And we forged it, and we heat treated it. It was easy to forge. We heat treated it, oil quenched it, tempered, and then to pass, didn't the shop teacher use his chisel, and I think he hit our chisels with his chisel and a hammer. And if it cracked, obviously, the heat treat was bad.
Yeah.
And if it bent or took a huge, a huge gouge or whatever, then it was, and you got graded on basically the performance of your chisel. And it was like,
That's pretty cool.
it was the coolest thing ever. And I nagged that guy to make a knife or a sword. And he said, he had a policy that, we couldn't do weapons like that in school or knives. So then I remember I went home and I found this aluminum tent stake. It was 90-degree tent stake, and I hammered it out flat, and I stuck this wooden handle on it. Biggest piece of shit ever. And I showed him. He's like, "God, it's a piece of shit." But it was. But you know what? It was pretty cool, and that was like the first time I made anything. And then after that, we tried to make swords.
Yeah.
And yeah. Remember how yours was?
Yeah. My first swing, it bended like that rototiller blade, like a 90.
You wrapped it around it like a dead tree. It was cool. that was in 7th grade. I got a drill for Christmas, and I found that sheet of steel that we procured from your dad. His dad had all kinds of metal, and it was just, we didn't know anything. It was just like some kind of stainless, maybe a high nickel kind of steel. But when you don't know anything except you forged one chisel, but didn't know anything about forging or metallurgy, heat treat. And so I remember I had that sheet of steel was like maybe 18 by 2 feet or 3 feet, and I diagonally across it drew the sword, and I hacksawed as far as I could, which was only about 4 inches on all 4 sides, and then I drilled all these holes, drill, and this took days and days and days of drilling all these holes, and then I used the chisel from metal shop, and I hammered and I chiseled it all out, and then I ground. We had a bench grinder. I bench ground this, and I worked on this. I mean, it seemed like weeks and nights and nights and nights. Plus, there's no real shop. I was using it was a big galvanized bucket, like a 5-gallon galvanized bucket for a horse. It was like you give the horse water from.
Yeah.
And I was drilling through that. And finally, I got it all done, all chiseled out and ground really roughly. Hammered a pipe on the handle, wrapped it up with one of Michael's black belts. It was
is that the one I used to chop the 2x4s with?
Yes, that's exactly.
That was the best sword ever.
Still have it. And so he's like, "Oh, that's awesome." So then,
Do you remember how I cut mine?
Yes, this is what he does. He takes the rest of the steel into the school, into the metal shop. Tells Mr. Winder, he goes, "Hey, my dad needs." He traced out, it looked like a sword. It was straight. It wasn't like a katana. And he goes, "Oh, my dad needs this leaf spring for a wagon. Could you cut this out?" The metal shop teacher gave him some grief. He was like, "Dad, you can't use that it's not spring steel, whatever." But he cut it out for you. So I spent like months, at least I feel like it was months, cutting and drilling and chiseling. And like 2 days later, he comes back with this perfectly bandsawed out sword.
See, intellect.
Yeah, that's that intellect, I guess. And
Didn't do much good after
no.
high school, though.
But that was the first start that we actually got into making. Seeing. And you could take those swords and you could cut pumpkins, and they were the worst. They're like a big giant butter knife.
Yeah.
But you could cut pumpkins, And you cut like, political signs when you're in 7th grade and they're in your yard and you cut all kind of just smash, cut, break.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And that's really how the two of us really got into it, as far as being able to create stuff and really get out and have fun with it. So that's the story there. Good times.
Bowie's on his old saw blades.
The next time we'll get into that because we learned how to get quote unquote tool still, and then we learned about these gigantic saw blades, hacksaw blades on a power hacksaw, which still to this very day will make you an awesome, small knife or small sword or large knife, Bowie knife, whatever.
Cool. And then how did you get into knife making professionally?
That's a good question. Oh, well, I guess really that we were both making custom knives, and I was doing some small shows like the Ohio, what was that called? The Ohio Classic Show. No, it's not up anymore. But I used to do that show, and then I started doing the Blade Show. I would go down to the Blade Show when I was right out of high school, 1994 or 5, with R.W. Wilson, and I found out when I moved to Pittsburgh and went to school, he wasn't far from there, so I visited him and really saw the real tools of knife making. Like I didn't know anything about a 2x72 belt grinder, and R.W. made all that stuff, and that's when I really got to see what a real, a one-man custom knife shop was like. And then I would go down there every once in a while. It's only like a half hour from me. And he's quite a character, R.W. Wilson, if you don't know him. And I bought some of his, he made me my belt grinders and disc grinders and buffers that, the one was from 1996, and I still use it. So he knew what he was doing there. And, going to knife shows. Then I met Cold Steel and Blade at Blade Show, and I sold them the AK-487 design for a very modest sum. And then I just had this relationship, so then eventually I went with them full time just to make prototypes. So I worked out of my own shop making prototypes for Cold Steel, and we had a lot of demand, and that's when I got, John, you came on and helped out a lot.
Yeah, well, I was in 12th grade then, and you just needed someone to cut bandsaw parts and sweep the floor and do that. So actually, I professionally started my knife making. That would have been probably 2006.
We were making a lot of story, and we made the Shuriken. Remember the Shuriken? Actually, I made those, and then
all the subhilt ones.
Oh yeah, so we did it.
Which ones?
Threw knives all day too.
Oh yeah, there's a couple days where you just sent me outside with a bucket.
I throw these knives. See how they
work. It was good.
And then we
we switched the handle on some of them too. We did the prototypes for the...
Yeah, that was like the trough handle and the GI Tanto.
Yeah, the GI Tanto and
they had a cord wrap before that.
The Shanghai Shadow.
Yeah, we did the polypropylene samples for that.
Then the ring pommel dagger. That wasn't really a throwing knife.
Oh, like this.
But you did those. You made those you mocked up with the urethane.
Oh yeah, we made molds and cast the handles because they were supposed to be injection molded. That was a project there. And then eventually we got Mike. Yeah. Came to work with Cold Steel because we needed another knife maker.
That probably wasn't a year after that.
Yeah. So how long have you been?
I think 11 or 12 years.
Back when he was my scruple.
Yeah. When you taught him the ways of the milling machine.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we've been with Cold Steel ever since, and it's a good gig because they're like a customer that pays you every week or every 2 weeks, and they're in California and we're in Pennsylvania. And we get a lot of knives, and we get to test knives and make knives and
break knives.
Break knives, yeah. One of the cool things that I really like about designing, especially for Cold Steel, is they do a lot of products, and a lot of things I make, or I don't really want to make for myself. I don't want to make a pocket shark, or it's not something I want to do in my custom business. But I really like doing the design and the prototype of certain things and just starting the manufacturing process. So we certainly get to fill that void with Cold Steel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of projects where you're not going to make them with Wallace Edge tools, but it's a cool R&D job to get it done.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's nice too.